We've come a long way in the world of retro game scaling and emulation, but with all that progress came a lot of complexity that's overwhelming for new users and frustrating to people that just want to get in and play their games. My goal here is to try to address that with this video. I'm going to show you the quickest way to get an image that looks very good on a modern monitor but is still authentic to how these games would have played on their intended displays, then setting them up in a way that lets you just hop into your games. Afterwards, we'll be building on that to get a nice CRT look. That being said, this stuff can get very technical. I'll try to avoid jargon as much as possible, but I'll explain relevant things as we go along. I'm going to be using RetroArc, but the majority of concepts and settings here are going to apply to most emulators. RetroArc is just objectively the most powerful way to have fine-tuned control over how your games look and play. You just need to know how to use it though. Okay, one of the biggest aspects of RetroArc that I see new users struggling with is how to save their settings. They'll set their games up exactly how they want it, only for it to all be gone the next time they start up RA. So I'm going to quickly explain how RetroArc saves configs. RA uses a kind of hierarchy to save settings. This is because consoles and systems will sometimes need different settings than what you have set globally, and furthermore, sometimes different games that run on the same emulator will need their own configs. Here's my lazy-ass graph of how it all works. Game-specific overrides take precedence over content directory overrides, which will then apply above core overrides, which will apply above your main config. So if you're using some kind of pre-built RetroArc install like emudeck, they'll be using core or directory overrides usually, meaning that changing the main config will have no effect, and that can be really annoying if you don't understand why. If that's happening to you, find out what overrides are in place by going to the quick menu while you have that game or core running, going to overrides, and checking the active override at the top there. So in this situation, I have quickness.config, meaning I do have an active override file, so if I try to change any main settings, it's not going to apply. Oh, and I'm only using quickness here because I'm too lazy to reset my own configs. I know Messin is the better emulator. Alright, let's start with the main config. Alright, so to get rid of this override, we're just going to remove core overrides. You want to also maybe check if there's a game override, but in this situation, we don't have any. I'm going to assume you already went to the online updater, downloaded the cores you want, updated assets, core info, and shaders and all that. We're going to go to video, scaling. We're going to set integer scale on, overscale no, and aspect ratio to core provided. This gives us a good base to build on with overrides without making it too annoying to set up every single core. If you have a high refresh rate display, you can go to sync and take advantage of blind frame insertion. That's beyond the scope of this video though. Otherwise, you can just leave everything to default. I have sync to exact frame rate on at the bottom there because my display has FreeSync. This has the core run at the exact timings of the original consoles. I'll leave a link with a better explanation, but NES, for example, runs at 60.09 instead of an even 60 Hz, so this maintains that. Leave this off in the main settings unless you've tried it and you know it works. Otherwise, you have to unset it for every single console. It's a total pain in the ass. And I'm going to quickly make a mental note here that our video driver in the main settings is Vulkan. This is going to come up a little later. All right, let's start a game. I'm going to be using two tools here. I like to use the NES Mega Man games. They make poor scaling really obvious, and the NES plus SNES in general are some of the harder consoles to get right. We're also going to be using the 240p test suite. It gets quite in-depth for new users, but we're going to be using a specific test, and we'll go to that in a sec. So any Mega Man game here is going to work. I'm just going to go with 5. All right, so we're going to be focusing on Mega Man's health bar mainly. The overall image looks pretty okay, but it's tiny. Technically, the aspect ratio here is actually wrong for the NES. This is how it would have looked like, 4:3 on a CRT, but the actual NES resolution is a lot skinnier than this. It's 8:7. Alright, so here's the wrong way to fix this. Alright, so let's do something about these huge borders. This is all in 1080p, by the way. If I turn off integer scaling, you'll see how the Mega Man's health bar is messed up. The individual lines are not the same height. This is because all we did was stretch the image. So now on the y-axis, we have uneven pixels. And since we have it in 4:3, the pixels are uneven on the x-axis too. Alright, now let's check out the scrolling test on a 240p test suite. See how the grass is kind of shimmering at the bottom and the scrolling looks off in the mountains? That's coming from our aspect ratio 4:3. If we set it to the actual NES aspect ratio of 8:7, and then turn integer scaling back on, you'll notice that the scrolling is smooth. But now we're stuck with that small, skinny image. So the question is, how do we get the same physical area on the screen as non-integer scaling, but keep our correctly shaped pixels so the scrolling is smooth? We're going to be using two things here, overscale and an interpolation shader. Overscale fills the screen, but instead of stretching the image, it zooms it in, so our y-axis pixels are actually maintained. On a scaler, this is usually called 5x or something to that effect. Interpolation will blur the edges of the pixels slightly, letting us have 4:3 and smooth scrolling. Only one issue though. Vulkan doesn't like it when you render outside the screen resolution. It's a pretty long-standing bug, unfortunately, so flipping overscale on just gives us a black image. But not a big deal. NES is not a demanding system, so losing the Vulkan performance advantage isn't really an issue. Remember when we checked the video driver? We're going to go back to the main menu and set it to glcore. But now we need to restart the program so it can actually switch. The thing is though, if we do that, it's just going to default back to Vulkan. I want to save it so that it's going to default to opengl, but only for this specific NES core. I want everything else to just remain on Vulkan. And now that we know how to properly save our settings, that's easy. So we're going to go back to our quick menu, overrides, and then save our core overrides after changing the driver. All right, there you go. It worked. Now we're going to go get our nice big image. So let's go to settings, video, scaling. We're going to keep integer scaling on and then overscale on. And there you go. Now check out Mega Man's health bar. We have a bigger image that fills the screen, top to bottom, with our pixels maintained. So everything looks correct. All right, now we want to set our aspect ratio to 4:3, but keep that smooth scrolling. We're going to be doing this with a shader. So we're back at our 240p test suite scroll test over here. So we're going to open up our quick menu. We're going to go down to shaders, flip on the last used shader directory. That way it's much more convenient when you're trying out different shaders. So we're going to go low preset, slang, and then all the way down to interpolation. There's a whole bunch. These are just different approaches to interpolate the image. I like sharp bilinear 2x prescale, but it's a little demanding if you're on a weaker system. Quilt is also good, and so is the regular sharp bilinear. And of course, you're free to try them out and just pick whatever you like. If you're non-integer scaling vertically and you want scan lines, generally it's not going to work because they'll be uneven. Bilinear scan lines here will let you have slightly soft but mostly even scan lines, and then you can go to shader parameters and adjust the brightness and whatnot. All right, and there you go. We're at 4:3, and the scrolling is nice and smooth. Interpolation is basically magic. Now that we have our shader, we need to save it so that it'll apply automatically. This is going to be separate from the other overrides. So we're going to go back to the quick menu, back to shaders, and then we're going to go to save preset. You can save it globally. In this situation, we're going to be saving the core preset. All right. Now we have a nice full image and 4:3 while keeping a vertical integer scale and the smooth scrolling. And in the future, NES games using the quickness core are going to just automatically apply all this. So from now on, we just need to choose a game and play it. We are quite literally having our cake and eating it too. Just quickly note that the systems and games that are natively 4:3 won't need the interpolation step since you're not really stretching anything. You can either look up what resolution your game runs at and apply per game settings, or just be lazy like me and set everything to 4:3 and interpolate, since it's always going to look fine that way. And yeah, you can very much stop here if you want, but let's take it a step further and let's put some icing on our cake. We're going to get a CRT effect going. Because our defaults are so good, all we need to do is just change the shader. So same as before, we're going to go to shader, we're going to go to load preset, slang, we're going to be choosing CRT this time, and you have a shit ton of options. This is going to be up to you. My favorites are CRT guest for stronger systems and then ZFast CRT for the weaker ones. So we're going to just go ahead and apply it. Notice how even though we took off our interpolation shader, there's no shimmer. CRT filters will usually include a blurring step, so it's not really needed in this situation. Let's see how it looks like in an actual game. That's pretty great. I'm sure video compression is going to ruin the scan lines, but whatever. From here, you can actually go to shader parameters, and then you can go crazy tweaking it to how you like. I like the CRT guest defaults. Also, I'm lazy, so I'm just going to leave them all the same. And yeah, there you go. Save the override when you're happy with what you got, and there you go. Now you can scale your game, make it look great, and have it all apply on its own so you can just jump in and get to playing. Hit like if you liked it, subscribe for more quality video game content, and yeah, see you.